Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a story that's been just everywhere, the tragic crash of that Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner.
Yeah, it's been unavoidable.
We've pulled together everything we can find, official statements, news reports, analyses, to try and see beyond just the headlines.
Right.
We want to piece together what actually happened, understand the human cost, and look at the investigations that are now underway.
And it's important, I think, to state up front, this isn't just another air crash, as tragic as they all are.
No.
This one is different because it's the first ever fatal incident involving a Boeing Dreamliner. That's significant.
That's hugely significant.
So our goal here is to, synthesize all these different pieces of information, pull out maybe some surprising details, and help you understand not just the what, but the why it matters, the broader implications.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with the basic facts. What do we know for sure happened?
All right, so June 12th, 2025, Air India flight AI-171. It's a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, registration VTAMB.
A relatively new aircraft type, known for being cutting edge.
Exactly. It was scheduled to fly from Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Airport in Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. Pretty standard route. But very shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad, something went terribly wrong. The plane crashed, and not in an open field, but directly into a hostile block of the BJ Medical College in Meghani Nagar, right there in Ahmedabad.
Right in the city. That's chilling. And the passenger load?
Yeah, it was substantial. 242 people on board. That breaks down to 230 passengers, and they were from various places, India, UK, Portugal, Canada, among others, plus a crew of 12.
And the descriptions of the crash itself are just horrific. Reports of a very rapid descent right after takeoff.
That seems to be the case, yes. Losing altitude quickly, then crashing and exploding into this massive fireball.
You see the images, that tail section just embedded deep into the building. For a Dreamliner, known for its safety, it just raises so many immediate questions. How does that happen so fast?
It's the core question, isn't it? Especially with an aircraft that had, until this point, a spotless fatal accident record.
And the human cost? Just devastating.
Almost unbelievable. Of those 242 people on the aircraft, tragically, 241 died.
Oh, my God.
There was, incredibly, one survivor, a British national, reportedly of Indian origin. It's hard to even comprehend surviving something like that.
A single survivor. And the impact wasn't just contained to the plane, was it?
No, absolutely not. Because it hit that hostile building, there were casualties on the ground, too. 19 people in the building were killed.
18!
And more than 60 others on the ground were injured. So the total loss of life is staggering, 260 people in all.
It's just an immense scale of tragedy. Has there been any progress on identifying the victims? That must be incredibly difficult.
Actually, yes, and quite remarkably so. As of June 24th, so just 12 days after the crash, authorities reported that 259 of the 260 victims, that's including those on the ground, had been positively identified.
Wow. 259 out of 260. That quickly.
Yes. Just one passenger remaining, awaiting final DNA confirmation. Given the circumstances, that speed is, well, it's a testament to the forensic teams working around the clock.
Especially considering the conditions they faced. I read reports about extreme heat at the crash site.
That's right. We're talking temperatures reaching approximately 1,000 degrees Celsius in the immediate aftermath because of the fire.
1,000 degrees. Imagine trying to conduct rescue, let alone recovery and identification in that.
Exactly. It severely hampered the initial rescue efforts, even though first responders and the National Disaster Response Force, the NDRF, they got there quickly.
Yeah.
But that intense fire just magnified the damage, both to the aircraft wreckage and to the buildings. It makes the investigators' job much, much harder.
Right, because evidence is literally being incinerated.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that investigation. Who's leading the charge?
The primary investigation is being handled by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB. That's standard procedure. But given that it's a U.S.-manufactured aircraft, the Boeing 787, they have crucial support from the U.S. National Transport Safety Board, the NTSB.
Right, that makes sense. International cooperation.
Absolutely essential in cases like this. It ensures all the necessary expertise, particularly regarding the aircraft design and systems, is brought to bear.
And the key pieces of evidence everyone always asks about the black boxes.
Good news on that front. Both the cockpit voice recorder, CVR, and the flight data recorder, FDR, were recovered from the wreckage.
Despite the fire, that's impressive.
They're built tough for exactly this reason. And critically, they've both been successfully downloaded at a specialized facility in New Delhi.
So investigators now have that raw data, the flight parameters, the sounds from the cockpit. That must be invaluable.
It's fundamental. It provides the minute-by-minute story of the flight's final moments. Engine readings, control inputs, altitude, speed, and, crucially, whatever was said or heard in the cockpit.
That data is really the foundation for figuring out the why.
Precisely. And underlining the global significance, the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, has sought observer status in the investigation.
Okay, so this is being watched very closely at the highest levels of international aviation safety.
Definitely. Lessons learned here could potentially impact safety protocols worldwide, especially concerning the Dreamliner fleet.
When can we expect to hear anything concrete? Is there a timeline for, say, a preliminary report?
Typically, a preliminary report comes out within weeks or a few months. The estimate here is perhaps around 3 months.
Okay.
That would be once they've done the initial analysis of that black box data. It might not have all the answers, but it should give the first real indications of the potential cause or contributing factors.
And given this is the first fatal Dreamliner crash, what sort of things will they be looking at extra closely, do you think, beyond the usual factors?
Well, you'd expect intense scrutiny on everything specific to the 787, its advanced avionics, the software systems, the performance of its composite structures in a crash and fire scenario.
Right. Those composite materials were revolutionary, but also raised questions early on.
Exactly. So manufacturing processes, maintenance records, operational procedures specific to Air India's 787 fleet, it'll all be under the microscope. It could lead to reviews of certification standards, maybe new airworthiness directives globally.
It feels like the ripples from this could spread quite wide.
Potentially, yes. Now, moving beyond the immediate investigation, there's also been significant reaction from other quarters.
Yes, let's talk about the response. What about from Air India's side or their owners, Tata Sons?
Tata Sons has acted quite decisively on the welfare front. They're setting up a dedicated Euro 100 crore welfare trust. It's called the AI 171 Trust.
500 crore rupees. That's a substantial amount. What's it for?
Specifically for the victims' families. Support, welfare. And on top of that, they've already provided 1.25 crore in compensation for each person who died.
Okay, so significant immediate financial support alongside the longer-term trust.
Yes, it seems like a very proactive approach to corporate responsibility in the face of such a disaster.
And what about the government? How is the Indian government and regulatory bodies responding?
There's definitely oversight happening. A parliamentary committee has actually summoned India's top civil aviation official, the secretary, and also officials from Boeing.
Summon Boeing, that's quite direct.
It shows they want answers, especially regarding safety oversight for this aircraft type, given its unique status as the first fatal crash.
So accountability is being sought at high levels.
Seems so. And practically, all the other Dreamliners currently in Air India's fleet are undergoing thorough safety inspections.
A fleet-wide check. Makes sense.
And there's talk of a broader reassessment of aviation safety protocols within India. So it's triggering action on multiple levels: operational, regulatory, parliamentary.
It really raises that question, doesn't it? What wider impacts will this tragedy have on aviation standards, not just in India, but potentially globally, especially for newer generation aircraft?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question hanging over the industry right now.
Amidst all this technical and official activity, we have to remember the human core of it, the families.
Absolutely. The grief is immense. And we've seen these really poignant scenes, families holding symbolic funerals as they wait for or receive DNA confirmation. It's about finding some form of closure in an impossible situation.
It's heartbreaking. And there's also talk about the crash site itself. What's planned there?
The current plan, according to authorities, is to demolish the damaged hostile buildings.
Demolish them.
And the intention is to create a memorial site there, a place for remembrance.
That sounds like a sensitive and appropriate step, eventually. But I also read that this plan is causing some debate.
Yes, it appears so. There seems to be discussion about the timing and priorities.
How so? What's the conflict?
Well, it likely revolves around the fact that the investigation is still very much ongoing. The site itself is still technically part of that investigation, even after recovery efforts.
Right. So preserving potential evidence versus the need for a memorial space?
Exactly. And perhaps questions about designing a memorial before the full why of the crash is understood. It highlights this really difficult tension, doesn't it, between the immediate very raw emotional need for remembrance and healing, and the meticulous, often slow process of investigation and finding answers.
Yeah, that's a really delicate balance to strike. It's fascinating how quickly that conversation shifts from the immediate horror to long-term healing and remembrance.
It is. Societies grapple with this after every major tragedy.
So to try and pull this together, we've looked at the incident itself, the terrible human cost, the complex investigation now underway with international help, the corporate and government reactions, and now this emerging discussion about remembrance. It's incredibly multi-layered.
It really is. And as we've tried to show in this deep dive, understanding it requires looking at all those layers simultaneously.
So we aim to give you, our listener, a comprehensive picture based on what's known right now.
And thinking about those ongoing investigations, the quest for answers, alongside the plans for a memorial. It really does underscore that tension we just talked about, the need for facts and accountability versus the long, slow path of community healing.
Definitely.
What does a tragedy like this ultimately teach us? About, constantly pushing aviation safety forward, yes, but also about how we as communities process such sudden, profound loss.
That's the thought to leave people with, I think. As you go about your day, maybe consider those layers. A single event, but the impact ripples out, affecting individual lives, families, national regulations, global industry standards, and even how we choose to remember. It's a lot to reflect on.